Yes, we're negotiating. Let's talk about what we agree on first, because, if you really spend time to do that, you're sometimes surprised at how little you really disagree on. Core values that they really hold near and dear, and not give too much attention to the loudest voice.
62% of Americans are afraid to speak their minds. That's right, more than half of us are walking on eggshells, scared to death of saying the wrong thing and getting canceled. Dr. Phil's not having it. He's taking on the woke mob and their cancel culture, and he's got some hard truths that'll make you think twice about what's really going on in our society. Ready to hear what he's got to say? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Dr. Phil's not pulling any punches these days. He's stirring up a hornet's nest with his take on gender education in schools. On a recent episode, he dropped a bomb that's got everyone talking. Parents are freaking out about schools teaching kids about gender. They're worried their little ones are getting hit with ideas they're not ready for. Dr. Phil's right there with them, asking if we're pushing this stuff too early. He's not saying don't teach it, but he's wondering if elementary school is the right time for pronouns and gender fluidity. Things got heated when Dr. Phil faced off with a teacher on his panel. This teacher was all for early gender education, but Dr. Phil wasn't buying it. He called her out, saying her arguments were just conclusions, not facts.
He says his Gen Z students are lazy, less motivated, only interested in themselves, and need to socialize more.
Ouch! But it didn't stop there. An activist jumped in, accusing Dr. Phil of being hateful just for mentioning biological facts. Can you believe it? Dr. Phil fired back hard. He asked a question that's got everyone thinking. Are we erasing cisgender women in our rush to be inclusive of trans folks?
Another woman. And when it's being taught in school that, that's just the norm, that it's just mom and dad, it kind of offends us.
The audience was split right down the middle. Some were cheering Dr. Phil on, while others looked like they wanted to throw their shoes at him. It's like watching a tennis match, but instead of a ball, they're slinging hot button issues back and forth. This whole thing's setting up for one hell of a debate. Dr. Phil's not backing down, and neither are his critics. It's like watching two trains heading for each other on the same track. You know there's gonna be a crash, but you can't look away. So what do you think? Is Dr. Phil onto something here, or is he way off base? It's a touchy subject, no doubt, but one thing's for sure. He's got people talking, and maybe that's the whole point. People are talking, sure, but who's actually listening? Dr. Phil's about to drop a truth bomb that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about free speech in America. Ever wonder why your social media feed feels like an echo chamber? Well, here's the kicker. Dr. Phil's got the stats to back it up. A whopping 62% of Americans are scared to speak their minds. That's more than half the country walking on eggshells.
Yes, we're negotiating. Let's talk about what we agree on first, because, if you really spend time to do that, you're sometimes surprised at how little you really disagree on.
Afraid to say what they really think. And Dr. Phil's not having it. He's saying this fear is tearing us apart. How are we supposed to have real conversations if everyone's too scared to open their mouths? It's like we're all playing a game of don't offend anyone, and nobody's winning. You've seen it happen, right? Someone says something that doesn't fit the approved narrative, and bam, they're out of a job. Their reputation's in the toilet. It's happening to regular folks, celebrities, doesn't matter. Say the wrong thing and you're toast. But here's where Dr. Phil's really stirring the pot. He's calling out this idea that if you disagree with someone, you must hate them. Like, what?
If you say something that they agree with, instead of accepting that you say something they agree with, they want to fight against it because they just want to be right.
Since when did having a different opinion make you public enemy number one? Dr. Phil's challenging us to think about what happens if we keep this up. If we're all too scared to speak our minds, where does that leave us? A bunch of yes men nodding along to whatever's trending. That's not a society, that's a herd.
Do that if you're kind of agreeing just with what your side beats the drum on.
And then he drops this bomb. If facts make you this upset, maybe reality isn't your strong suit. Ouch. But he's got a point, doesn't he? The audience goes wild, some cheering, some looking like they want to throw their shoes at him. It's like the room's split right down the middle. So here we are, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Speak your mind and risk getting canceled, or keep quiet and watch honest conversation die a slow death. And you know who's feeling this the hardest? Hollywood. The entertainment industry's walking on the thinnest ice of all. But that's a whole other can of worms we're about to open up. Ever wonder why Hollywood seems obsessed with being woke these days? Dr. Phil's not buying it. He's taking aim at Tinseltown's sudden love affair with diversity, and he's not pulling any punches. Dr. Phil's saying what we're all thinking. A lot of these diversity initiatives in Hollywood are just for show. It's like they're putting on a performance, but there's no substance behind it. They're all about looking good on the surface, but when you dig deeper, there's not much there. And don't even get him started on cultural appropriation in entertainment. Dr. Phil's got some thoughts on that too. He went head to head with a professor who was all about strict rules on cultural borrowing. But Dr. Phil wasn't having it. He's saying sometimes imitation is just a form of flattery. Not everything's disrespect, you know.
Core values that they really hold near and dear, and not give too much attention to the loudest voice.
Dr. Phil's really heating things up when he starts talking about corporate diversity campaigns. He's calling out these big companies for just checking boxes. They're not making real changes, just trying to look good. It's all smoke and mirrors. You should have seen the audience when Dr. Phil dropped this truth bomb. If they really cared about making a difference, they'd focus on meaningful change, not just trying to look woke for PR purposes. Some people were nodding along, others looked like they'd been slapped. It just shows how complicated this whole issue is. Dr. Phil's not saying diversity is bad. He's just questioning if Hollywood's doing it right. Are they really making a difference? Or are they just putting on a show? It's got people talking, that's for sure. Some think he's spot on, others think he's way off base. But that's the point, isn't it? Getting people to actually think about this stuff instead of just going along with whatever's trendy. So what do you think? Is Hollywood really committed to diversity? Or are they just playing pretend? Dr. Phil stirred up a hornet's nest with this one, and it doesn't look like the buzz is dying down anytime soon. Remember when saying what you think didn't get you in trouble? Dr. Phil does, and he's not happy about how things have changed. Social media platforms tried to shut him up, but he's not going down without a fight. What happens next might surprise you. So, Dr. Phil's been making waves with his opinions on woke culture, and boy, did it stir up a hornet's nest.
This won't withstand challenge. This cancel culture bullshit. Cancel culture should be council culture.
Social media platforms aren't too happy with what he's saying. They've been trying to censor clips from his episodes. Can you believe it? It's like they're scared of what he's got to say. Critics are coming at Dr. Phil hard, calling him all sorts of names. Out of touch, they say. Behind the times, they claim. But you know what? Dr. Phil's not backing down. He's doubling down instead. He's got something to say, and he's gonna say it no matter who tries to stop him. Dr. Phil's got a bone to pick with these tech companies. He's saying they're messing with free speech. Think about it. If they can just silence anyone they don't agree with, where does that leave us? It's like we're living in some kind of dystopian novel where big tech decides what we can and can't say. But it's not just about Dr. Phil. He's worried about all of us. He's saying that if we start making certain topics off limits, we're in dangerous territory. It's like we're putting up no trespassing signs on parts of our brains. Dr. Phil's not having it. He's saying we need to hear all sides, even if we don't agree with them. You know what's crazy? Dr. Phil's actually arguing for the people who disagree with him. He's saying we need to listen to everyone, not just the people we like.
Any way you can, you're free to do so. But that does not mean that the rest of us have to join that illusion.
It's like he's fighting for the right of his critics to criticize him. Now that's something you don't see every day. This whole thing's setting up for one hell of a showdown. Dr. Phil on one side, his critics on the other. It's like a cultural tug of war, and we're all caught in the middle. But maybe that's exactly where we need to be. Maybe we need to feel the tension to understand what's really at stake here. So what do you think? Is Dr. Phil right to stand his ground, or should he just shut up and go with the flow? It's a tough call, but one thing's for sure. This conversation isn't going away anytime soon. And maybe that's exactly what Dr. Phil wants. So what's the deal with Dr. Phil and this whole woke culture thing? He's been taking shots left and right, and people are losing their minds over it. But maybe he's onto something. He's saying we're all scared to speak up, that disagreeing doesn't mean you hate someone, and that Hollywood's just putting on a show with all this diversity stuff. Is Dr. Phil some kind of genius who's figured it all out, or is he just an old guy who doesn't get how things have changed? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Here's the thing, whether you love him or hate him, Dr. Phil's got people talking, and isn't that the whole point? We're all so worried about saying the wrong thing that we've stopped saying anything at all. Maybe it's time we started having real conversations again, even if they're messy, because if we don't, who knows where we'll end up?